If you don't have a journal, take out your unicorn trapper keeper from 5th grade, whatever, and let's start writing things down, because your brain is not good at planning. Your brain is in the future. Your brain is good for planning right now, right? That's all your brain really cares about is the present. And so we need to get a set of working papers to use the tool of your brain to create a plan for the future, much like I'm sure with your financial services background, what you would learn about helping someone plan for retirement or whatever. Like, you have to do things on paper and on purpose, and it's a skill. And if you don't do a little bit every day or a little bit every week, you'll never get better at it, and you'll never get closer where you want to go. So that's sort of a broad generalization of what I would do with some of my people.
Let me jump in on that for a second. So when I knew what you're coming on after you told me about how you like to have people write things down. By the way, my financial services background for planning for retirement, that's just kind of recent. That's the area I'm into right now in a little bit. But I've always been into bookkeeping. I've been a master bookkeeper my whole life, hands-on, and business plans, strategic planning, but business modeling, things of that nature. And my slogan for right thinking is don't quit, plan ahead. It will get better. I mean, so you and I, it's just a marriage made in heaven, so to speak. Let me just give you a quote here when I started Googling scriptures about writing things down. Hey, I want everybody to know that. The internet's there. Google any phrase you want to and ask for God's point of view on it, and somebody's going to have written something. Exodus 17:14, quote, the Lord instructed Moses, write this down on a scroll as a permanent reminder. I love that because that's really kind of what it is. Jeremiah 30, verse 2. This says the Lord, the God of Israel, write all the words that I have spoken to you in a book. Well, as I Googled this kind of stuff, this article that I picked up that's going to reinforce what you just said in very simple terms. It doesn't have the person who wrote it. The website is happyhealthyandprosperous.com. So I want to give full credit to that. And then this was / importance - writing things down. And let me just tell you the 4 headers, and there's a good article here, but writing things down helps the information sink in. Writing things down gives you something to reference. Writing things down can be a resource for others. Writing things down can show you how much you've learned, how much you've grown, and how far you've come. Then there's all sorts of other practical steps. One thing that I'm going to point out, though, is there's probably not a one among us who doesn't daydream and think about all the things you do. And the difference between successful people and people that never really take that first step, because that's the whole secret to it all. You got to take that first step. Take it where you're at and then modify as you move forward. That's the Napoleon Hill concept. But here's what it is. If you're constantly thinking about something you're going to do and you don't write it down, you're repeating the process every time you think about it. But if you start taking notes, I remember when I was young, somebody taught me, hey, in the middle of the night when you're having a dream and you wake up and it's really exciting, write things down. Keep a pad of paper and a pen by your bed. But all I'm trying to say is that nothing's impossible. We can do anything we set our minds to if we have an organized, disciplined approach. So that's part of what I want to say. Come back to people that you come in contact with that breaks your heart, doesn't it? It breaks your heart. Some of these people are so changed when they get out there and they have a success. But then the littlest thing, really not little to them, trips them, knocks them down, and then they sort of go off in the wrong direction, and then you see them a year later after they get out.
Yeah, well, that's how process thinking can help you, because we're taught in our culture to be a win-lose culture, right? And there's this concept in martial arts that I heard once that I really liked, and it said you're either winning or learning, and that's when you have something that you see as negative happening. Pardon me. That's feedback. That's not losing. And so you had this earlier in our conversation. You talked about if someone feels like they have a big F that's on their that's like tattooed on their forehead, like the scarlet letter, basically. And if you think of it that way, then you will interpret any negative event to feed that view of yourself as I'm a convicted felon, or I have a conviction on my record, or I'm never going to escape this problem. And if you view that winning and losing, every time that you, quote, lose something, it will feed that negative image, and then you'll trip yourself back into dealing with those stressors in an old way. But if you think of process thinking of winning and feedback or winning and learning, then when something negative happens, you say, all right, I have to take responsibility for this, what's happening right now. I have to look at it. This feedback is telling me I need to change something. What do I need to change? And maybe it's the people that you're talking to. Maybe it's how you're talking. It doesn't, I can't fix anyone's problem, but I can help them learn a process where they can fix their own problem. And that's where the real power comes into taking responsibility, and the real power comes into, learning to interpret feedback as a way to change yourself and not be afraid of that.
You've said a lot of powerful things on the show so far, but I think the one thing that you just said is the most powerful. We can't change people. They have to do it themselves. They have to want to change themselves. Until they get to that point, we can teach them, show them anything that we want. We can do as much as possible, but they have to want to make the change. And I love that you said that. Let me get a quote or two that you wrote in your email to me. I teach people the concept of, quote, working papers. And then you use a quote that says, quote, on paper, on purpose. That's pretty much what you've been talking about. Is there anything else you want to add to that concept?
Well, the only thing that I thought about is that, and I will say this for myself because maybe this only applies to me and doesn't apply to anyone else, but when I write on paper, it allows me to see all my stupid ideas, right? Because most of 90% of what I put on paper, it's not going to work. But like you said it before, is that if you don't put it on paper, then you're just rolling these things around in your head, and these may be things that you've latched onto that aren't going to work. But you have to go through all of the things that aren't going to work to get something to work. And there's a quote that I always think about. Thomas Edison, they're famous for talking about how he had 10,000 tries to get the light bulb. And they said, well, how did you be able to do that? And he's like, no, I found 10,000 ways that it would work. Everyone focuses on that part of the quote, but they leave out the second part of that quote. Or something else that he said related to that quote, which is, it took me 10,000 tries before nature would give up her secret. Or I'm paraphrasing there. And that's beautiful. That quote always stuck with me because it links the failures to finding the secret. And so that every time that something negative happens or you get negative feedback, you just have to realize that you're one step closer to to having nature reveal her secret to you, or to having the universe or God, or however you want to, whatever you believe about life, is that part of the journey and process. Actually, you must go through those failures to get to where you want to go. And if you were shut down by a failure, you're never going to get where you want to go. You can embrace it as feedback, embrace it as learning. You will lap people that have never had the adversity that you've had. You can learn things and go places that people would never thought you could ever go by learning that process thinking. And that's your working papers help you to do that, because you create sort of you hear the term of an avatar, right? Like you create an avatar on your paper that the paper can make the mistakes for you, so that you can make a lot of those mistakes on paper and then go out and you're not having to make them in the real world. And that's why paper is so powerful, is because you can really compress time frames for yourself.
Wade, I got to tell you, this is our first real in-depth conversation. We just had a 15-minute conversation last week one day. But in my curriculum, my introduction to the module on business planning, it's this. Would you rather lose let's start off. Do you like to play Monopoly? Play a board game where, it's a nice board game there. Sure, everybody knows Monopoly. But would you rather lose everything you've got, your life savings, in a board game like Monopoly than in real life, where you jump into something kind of too fast, unprepared, and it doesn't go the way it should have gone, and you lose everything? That's why we do things on paper in a business plan, because you can look at all the obstacles, you can identify everything, you can take a sound approach to finding out all the right things that need to be done. I'm reading a book that a high school classmate at the reunion I went to last week, he gave me a copy of a book, and I was really honored. He said, Steve, I wanted you to have a copy of this book, and I haven't seen him in 20 years, but I'm not sure why he chose me to give a copy of the book, other than the fact that me and Larry Harcum had a lot in common. We were both, for the lack of a better word, screw-ups, delinquents. On the back of his book, he said to me, he said, do you believe that I really wrote a book, Steve? Well, I do, because I knew that he'd become a bank president, and his whole life went incredible. But he did some great stuff, and it's a book where he took a jet ski across, called the Great American Loop. He went out of Virginia Beach on the Atlantic Ocean, and he went all the way up north to the Erie Canal, came back down to the Great Lakes, came back all the way down the Mississippi River, came down around Florida, and came back to Virginia, 5,800 miles. And it's his chronicle of what he did on that. But he's given such positive steps here about how to do things like that. But it took a lot of preparation before he set out on that journey, because, I mean, he could have, that his wife, was scared to death for him. Why am I saying all this? No matter how bad your life's been, if you take the time to surround yourself with the right kind of people like you, Wade, people like me, if people surround themselves with people who genuinely care about them and want to pass on some knowledge and some truths to them, then anybody can succeed. Anybody can do it. Let me read your next quote here. You talk about metrics. Another concept I teach is metrics, because what is tracked naturally improves. I like that. Let me stop just for 1 second. I went off on a tangent there about Larry Harcum. Here's why I said that. He wrote down, somebody taught him, write down the 10 things that you want to accomplish in your life and put it away and pull it out in 5 years. And look and see if those things that you wrote down are still the things you want to do. And if you haven't done them, tell yourself, I've wasted 5 years, and hurry up and start working on them, because, if you really want to do them, then do them. But it takes a focus. It takes elimination of distractions. You're talking about tracking things with metrics. I mean, I think that's just basically evaluating yourself to see how well you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it kind of dovetails nicely into what you said about writing down what you want to do and look at it 5 years from now. Sometimes if you track something, you start to learn what it takes to get where you want to go, and you may learn that you actually really don't want to pay the price to the place to where you want to go. We all have sometimes in our mind this fantasy thinking of what we think we want our life to be, because we're either comparing it to other people or comparing it to some idea we have in our head. And if you have metrics that you determine, not me, not Steve, just the person that you're helping says, all right, this is important to me, and I want to improve this. It doesn't have to be money. It could be, how many times I see my kids, right? How many hours a week I see my kids, whatever. Like, that's a metric, and you decide. And then as you start to learn to track those simple metrics, you can then say, all right, what of this is working for me? What isn't? How can I course correct? But also you're forced to ask yourself, do I really want this thing? And sometimes you'll find that you don't, and that will be the path for you to find what you really want. And that's a skill too. But if you live in fantasy thinking all the time, you don't write things down, you don't track your progress, positive or negative, your brain is very powerful, and it will always rationalize a reason for where you are. It will usually rationalize too it's someone else's fault, or you're a victim, and that's why you are where you are. But if you take 100% responsibility for where you're at, and you are tracking where you're at, then you know why you are where you are, and you know if you're working to improve it or not, and then that falls directly on you. And then you're making the choice, yes or no. It's on you.
Beautiful. So I won't get into this topic right now because it gets kind of lengthy. We have about 10 minutes left, give or take. I want to stay focused on the work that you do, because this is just our first time, but I can see, I hope that you want to spend some time with Right Thinking and us collaborating, because what I see in you is a person that you're a professional. You're a lawyer. You're a criminal justice. You're a criminal attorney. But you have gone to a place in your life where you have so much love and compassion for other people that you've dedicated yourself to trying to take the people that are coming from this particular hardship population and trying to say, hey, listen, I think I can maybe help you get focused and get you in the right direction, or help you continue in the right direction that you've already come to. I have a thing called Pathway to Success, and it's daydream where you want to be in 5 years. And it's a whole process I put people through, kind of meditative. And then we lay out the path to get there, the training, the things you have to do, et cetera. We'll do that another time because it's real deep. Let me give one more of your quotes here. You said, also, I teach people the importance of short morning routine. Would you explain that?
Sure. So if your morning, depending upon when you get up, and it seems like such a simple thing, but so I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so when they wake up, or my wife wakes up, then my day shifts to my family. right? But for me, in order for me to be able to put myself in the right space, I have to get up, or I enjoy getting up at 5 a.m. That may be too early for some people, and I take a half an hour